This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
Welcome to From Guilt to Good, Self-Care Solutions for Busy Caregivers, the podcast rewriting the narrative of self-care. If you're a caregiver feeling stretched thin, torn between responsibilities, and longing for self-care, then you're in the right place. I'm Jeanette Yates, a fellow caregiver and someone who spent years doing all of the self-care things and never really feeling any better. After years of research, self-exploration, and lots of trial and error, I finally found a way to do self-care in a way that helped me feel good, not guilty. And then From Guilt to Good, we'll explore how you can do that too. Together, we'll hear from experts, we'll deal with actionable steps, hear heartfelt stories to guide you through rediscovering your worth, reclaiming your health, and getting back the life you've been too busy to enjoy. And today, I am so excited to welcome my best internet friend.
The memes.
We're the meme crew.
Meisters. Yeah.
That's right. This is Chris Carberg. He is a passionate digital media founder, most notably as the co-founder of postpartumdepression.org, and now as the founder and CEO of addictionhelp.com, one of the fastest growing addiction and mental health informational websites. Chris has combined his personal triumph over addiction and ongoing recovery with his entrepreneurial spirit to create digital solutions centered on mental health. And he is going to be talking to us. You're going to be talking to us today, Chris, about caregivers in recovery, caregivers and recovery, all the things that overlap with those things. We've got a lot to talk about today.
Yeah. This is something very, very near and dear to my heart. And I know it is, of course, to yours, but it's one of those places where when you've walked this road, it's a special kind of company, a special little family. No matter where you come from, if you're doing caregiving work, it is probably the most tiring and rewarding and upsetting and amazing thing in the world. So it's great to be here.
Well, one of the reasons I reached out to you to be on the podcast with me is we both have our own recovery experiences. And as caregivers, I'm a caregiver, you're a caregiver. Mm-hmm. I meet caregivers all the time. It's the most stressful thing. Like everybody's burnout, stressed out. And one of the things I remember when I was in my own burnout and I was in my own spiral down, thinking to myself, man, if I don't get some help and get out of this, I'm going to relapse. I'm going to start making poor decisions. Like I could feel that. And I thought to myself, man, if it's hard on the average person to be a caregiver and it sparks burnout and all of these feelings of guilt and overwhelm, how are my fellow recovery peeps doing out there with caregiving? And I know that as the number of people in need of caregiving, like the population is aging, living longer, all of these things, more and more people like you and I are finding ourselves in the position of caring for our loved ones. And just by default, that's going to mean more people in recovery or in different stages of recovery are going to be caregivers. And so I wanted you to kind of speak into that for us, for the caregivers out there that might be going through that same kind of thing.
Yeah, because, I think that one of the hardest parts about caregiving, I took care of my father when he was, he was battling cancer and had a lot of health problems. And I think one of the hard parts is that unlike, unlike just parenting, traditional parenting, you're not moving toward better. Right. A lot of times you're moving toward, something where each time it's getting harder. And so your patience wears thinner, and it kind of goes the opposite direction. Yeah. And so when my dad was sick, one of the things that really stood out to me was, I'm caring for him. I'm visiting him. He was in a living facility not far from here. We had moved him up from South Florida. And my mom, and that was a whole crazy thing. But what really hit me was just not being prepared for the emotions that were going to come out during that. I knew that watching a parent age, any of us, I think, can feel the weight of that. Yeah. But I don't think I was ready for how hard it was to almost see my father as a child, and to be, I had my daughter was very, very young at the time. I felt like I was more of a parent to my father than I was to my child at that time. And so, being in recovery, I've been sober since 2005. And, right around this time of year I'm about to celebrate my 19th year sober, and, which is fantastic and great. And it's a wonderful gift, but it doesn't go away during all of that. Right. And, what I did find is that, although I thought I had everything kind of nailed down appropriately in terms of, I was doing therapy, I was doing work for the most part. I've been doing that for a while, but I wasn't really prepared for just how much I was going to want to act out. Right. And it didn't come out necessarily through my traditional addictive ways. It came out in other ways, whether if it was outbursts of anger or if it was, binge eating, like there were things like that where it kind of snuck up on me. And so I think a lot of people who are in recovery they're not immune to the strain and stress of caregiving. And at the same time, there is also this beautiful opportunity for us to connect with the people we're caring for, to see their vulnerability. And my dad was someone who had battled addiction as well. And to see his own resolve. I really, to be honest with you, I didn't think caregiving would be that long of a journey for me, because my dad was like always of the mindset, if I get sick, just, throw me out back kind of deal. Right. So that was my expectation. Yeah. Right. He was like, just throw me out. But I saw a will to live, to survive, but it wasn't just like to just exist a little longer. It was like, there was like this fire in him that I never got to see. So, going through it, you're processing so many emotions, so many feelings at the same time. And it really is hard, especially if you're dealing with the vulnerabilities. I think that's the biggest thing though, is it causes tremendous vulnerabilities that just make you liable to have a slip.
I definitely agree. And one of the things that happened for me, and I know everybody's addiction story and recovery story is different, but for me, I think my problems that led to my behaviors were in some ways tied to the threat of my mom's illness. Like things happened kind of at the same time. And so, my mom's was ill most of my life, but when my caregiving really like ramped up. So like I've been a quote caregiver for 40 years, but I was a child. And so the caregiving was different, like I was counting my mom's medicine for her when I was
right. Yeah,
versus,
sure.
Like being her POA and medical, like it's a little bit different now, but as I stepped into that more, like you say, kind of like almost parent type role, and full-time more and the weight of the responsibility and all those emotions, I think one of the things that pulled me back towards like, those are not, I thought we got rid of those thoughts, was that I was kind of in a similar place mentally, that I had been, so I was like going back to, and I don't know if you've heard this too. People talk about this all the time. Like, whenever you start to take care of your parents, you start like to act like you did, like in your teen years, or like the way you talk to them or whatever.
I know. Yeah. No, you're so right. I noticed like there would be weird kind of blow up fights that we would have, arguments that were like, I wanted to like storm out of the room, like, and slam the door, but you couldn't, the door was always open kind of. Right. And I was like, there's nothing I can do to make us like a scene right here.
Right.
But you're right. You kind of pick up and you're like, and at the same time, it's like, wait, am I a teenager parenting a parent? I'm like, that is like a weird kind of trippy thing at the same time, that you're dealing with. And it was when you mentioned about how it kind of takes you back to that and the vulnerabilities of it. When we were talking about kind of this show, and I was thinking about my dad, when you were introducing me and you mentioned my site with my wife, postpartumdepression.org. It's funny, like I hadn't considered caregiving in that sense in my mind.
Right.
But for 9 months after, which is, again, like poetic kind of length of time to care for Jenna when she was very, very ill. That was a whole other thing. And so these things came very fast, one after the other, like from between when she had postpartum depression, which was intense and serious and very, very serious, to my dad's illness. They were kind of back to back in a way. Yeah. And I don't know how that, it almost seems like they tend to happen together. Things kind of happen at the same time or there's crossover in that way. And really it makes you extremely vulnerable and really kind of puts you like, if you don't have your ducks in a row or you don't have something to turn to, it really makes you, I think, just ripe for relapse.
I want to get to having something to turn to here in a minute, but something you said when you were talking about your dad a few minutes ago, I wanted to circle back on and just, if you want to talk about it, great. If not, sure. We'll just have my producer just cut this part out. But you mentioned that in some ways when you were caregiving for your dad, you were more of a parent to him than you were your child. Yeah. And I was curious if that was because you couldn't do it all. And so you had to pick one or what, cause I know that a lot of caregivers that are in this sandwich generation where we have children and we also have a parent that we're caring for, we feel like if we're doing a good job caregiving, we're not doing a good job parenting. If we're doing a good job parenting, we're not. So I want to kind of flesh that out a little bit more.
No, I actually love that question because I think the reality is that, there was only so much time in the day. And, I was blessed that Jenna was in a good place, that I felt, our daughter was safe and secure and was young enough to the point where I almost didn't think that it was going to be as big of an issue if I wasn't around as much during this time. But the other side is I don't even remember choosing. I just, there are so many needs and the emergencies that happen. And I still hear the phone ring. There's a ringer that if I hear it, I just, it just hits me. And the same thing if I'm in a hospital and I hear the beeps, on the machines. And it wasn't until I started learning what they all meant that it helped me to, to understand it.
Oh, that's just something's run out. On
right.
Salines out.
Exactly. Okay. Yes, completely. I'm like, I almost want to go in there and be like, y'all need a better branding component of your chirps. Your beeps and chirps. You could have a nicer one, maybe, that goes along with.
Songbird,
like a little dishwasher machine, that hold new dishwasher ones that are like, I'm happy when I start the dishwasher because it's so happy. It's telling me, it's like, I'm about to get to play with water. But I don't remember choosing. I just remember that the fires were blazing and there was, it was either going to fall on my mom who, even though she's so strong, so capable, I didn't feel like she could handle that. Like it was just too much. And so you feel like this desire to kind of, for me, I felt this desire to be the person he was to me. Yes. And I don't know if it wasn't chosen though. It was very much like that. But I do think that, I was separated from my daughter at the time a little bit, like when we were separated, not that kind of separated, but the other, you know what I mean? Like, so I was in South Florida when my dad first had a heart attack and had issues, and doing FaceTime and stuff like that. And I will tell you though that I remember the morning I was going down there, like I had this feeling of dread in my stomach, and I just was like, I just want to hug Elsie, like I want to hug her, and she was very, just an amazing kid about it, but it was, there isn't enough time for everything. And, I do think caregiving a lot of times, at least for, I will say I got better. I started to trust certain aspects of, like, once I had done my due diligence with the facility he was in, but you know how it is. You can't fully trust. It's very difficult to, to believe that everyone's giving their all the time. And, you don't want to be negative, but it's very challenging.
Well, and I think one of the things that you're speaking to here, and one of the things that that I had to do for myself when I was trying to figure out how to get out of the spiral downward, I always say, like, I wasn't burning out. Like I was burning to the ground. Like there was
right.
Like it was,
it wasn't just exhaustion. It was like complete and total.
I was melting away.
Yes.
Like it was just, so I think, there are times where we have to work above our capacity. So we have to go above and beyond, and we have to make, those choices, especially when the phone rings and you have to hop on a plane and get, you do what you have to do. But then at some point you have to, and it sounds like at some point you did do this where you were like, okay, do they stay down there or do they?
Right.
Where you have to say, okay, what is my capacity for caregiving, and still staying, in your case, and in my case, and also still staying in recovery, being with my family, the other relationships I have in my life.
Absolutely.
And I think for a lot of caregivers, that's what's missing, is they're like, what do I have to do for my loved one? That's what I'm going to do. And then whether it's just your own physical and mental and emotional health that suffers, or it's that plus all of the relationships around you. Yeah. I don't know. But I think when we can say, we get through the immediate all hands on deck situation, but then if we don't stop and have a time to process and think about and get some help. I'm not saying this is not easy on your own.
No, definitely not.
And that's one of the things I help caregivers do is okay, what are you doing right now? Are you working below, at, or above your capacity? And if you're working above your capacity, what happens when you get sick? What happens when someone else gets sick? What happens, and if there's no plan, if there's no strategy, that's when we have to start making different arrangements. And it sounds like, even though, like you said, you didn't make the choice at the beginning because you were just in crisis mode, there was some point where you said, okay, I need to be with my family. I also need to take care of my parents. This is how this is going to work.
Yeah. And that was hard because it was I think what it really came down to was, knowing that, so they had a condo down south, and, being 3 hours away, it doesn't feel that far away. And it was but at the same time, I did need to be with my family. I was starting a new company at the time, and it was, it's kind of I would work from 4 till 9, then I would go and spend time, and then I would go and lunch and do that. And then I'd work in the evening, and, you're running out of time. And my dad was not, he wasn't pleased with the idea of having to move and sell the house. So I had to kind of work in a clandestine way of, this is happening.
Right.
We have to figure this out. And then, at the same time, get his buy-in, because not only are you caring for the person is, you still want their approval.
Well, and sometimes we want just that parent approval, but also we want, depending on the nature of the illness or condition they have, as long as they have the ability to make decisions, cognitively and whatnot, you want them to have those choices as long as possible. So, sometimes that means they make decisions that you don't agree with, but they made them.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it is good that, the buy-in is always nice.
It was. And so I tried to set up as much as I could on my own to allow him, because a lot of times I do think that when we're caring for someone, they are seeing the stress of all the things surrounding the decision, not just the decision. Like if they could snap their fingers and do it, a lot of times they would. So I tried to handle the parts that would make him feel, oh, this would be impossible to do.
Right.
With me in this state right now, and then pose it the question, say, what if all that was done?
Right.
How would you feel then? What if I was 10 minutes away from you?
Right.
And I could spend, I bring my laptop, spend the day with you each day and work with you and help you. And so, it did become a joint kind of decision that he approved of, and supported. And, and then some of the things he trusted me on. I remember we bought a condo for them here, and I renovated the whole thing and had it pretty much ripped apart and rebuilt in about 45 days. And he only got to visit it once. And it was actually, God has crazy ways of these things work. He was supposed to come home. He was going to come home and do hospice at home, at that point. And at that point, he got another UTI, and it literally was like the next time he was going to come home, we had a sewage backup in the house. And it was like, so, we also had to be flexible with it. But he came and visited one day, and I remember he was looking around and he goes, it's a lot better than I imagined you would pull off. And I was like, okay, well, that's a backhanded compliment, but I'll take it, I guess. But
oh my
it
gosh.
is. Yeah, no, but it is a, did you, when you've dealt with this kind of stuff, do you feel, how do you feel in terms of having to overrule, a parent in something? How do you deal with the guilt even of that? And because that was one of the things that really made me, I was struggling with, because I did trust my dad's opinions so much. He was a really good gut reaction kind of guy. And, but I was wondering if you had experienced that kind of that stress as well.
So for most of my life, I thought my job was to make my mom happy in regard to her health and just in general, like nobody, we all want to make everybody happy. There are like legit people pleasers, which I am a recovering one of those as well. So, but also like we all, unless you're just a real big jerk, you want to make, you want people to like you.
Absolutely. No, totally. Yeah.
So, but the guilt is one of the most crushing things. And that's why caregivers like me, and like many of my community members that listen to this podcast, like we are stuck there because we can never do enough. We can never quite not feel guilty. And sometimes it's the explicit, you're not doing enough that comes out of the mouth of the loved one. Or sometimes it's that societal, like they're not happy, therefore I'm not doing a good job.
Right.
And so what I had to do, and now I have it all like fancy pants laid out, like in my brain and in my framework and all this kind of stuff. But like back then, like I tried to figure this out on my own for so long, but here's ultimately what I had to do. And it was redefine what being a good caregiver meant. And so instead of basing my, am I doing the right thing, enough things, the good enough thing on what she thought I should be doing or what my, my family background had shown me, or even my faith background. I had to say, okay, well, what does it really mean for me to be a good caregiver? What does that mean for me in this moment? And I had already gotten to the place where I was going to say, and I also have to take care of myself. Like I'd already gotten there. Right. Which was another step that was kind of pre that. But then I defined caregiving in a different way that was more about, yes, if, seeing my mom smile and having her be happy is a wonderful thing. But my primary goal with caregiving was to keep her safe and to keep her comfortable.
So that's great.
And
That's a really great way
and
to go about
sometimes
it.
safe and comfortable can't even so sometimes it's like,
Yes.
it's safe, comfortable, happy. And sometimes it's just safe and happy. And sometimes it's
right. Yes.
like, and sometimes
you got to go
it's
2 out
just
of 3.
safe. Yeah. Like it's,
right.
And so I was able to say to her, Mom, I really want you to be happy, but I can't make you happy.
Right.
But I can, I can do everything I can to make sure you're safe and make sure the people who are taking care of you are doing their due diligence to keep you safe. I can't make you happy.
Wow.
And, we know that about especially people in recovery, we talk about this all the time. Like, you didn't cause it. You can't.
No, right. No, right. Yes.
But then for some reason we think, oh, my mom, my parent is, and it sounds like your dad had your mom. And so there was a little bit, but like sometimes our loved ones, they, they're lonely. They don't have a social life. And it's like, we're like, oh, we have to go see them every day or they're going to sit there all by themselves. And it's like, well, I mean, yeah, that's nice. But are you like using all your sick days at work? Are you neglecting time with your family? Are you taking care of yourself?
Completely.
Just so, yes, it's nice to not for them, but we can't always do that.
No. That's such an amazing, I honestly, I do think that's such a powerful point though, that you can't make them, you can give them moments of joy.
Right.
But you cannot make someone no different than you can really control any of their emotions long term.
Right.
We did one thing for my dad where, he would have kind of bouts of, being lucid or not based upon his whether he had like an infection or not. And we had built this large poster board that had like a few points on it, which were, you are home. You are safe. We love you. Chris and Jenna are nearby, and we had pictures on it. So there was like, just anytime he would open his eyes, it was big and in front of him to try and hammer that home. So when I'd be on the phone, every now and then he would call me and he'd go, I'm at a golf course in the middle of this area. And I'd say, oh, hold on. So do you see any signs in front of you in the golf course? Hold on. I see one. It says you are home and you are safe. And so it would almost cross over somewhat, even in like those moments. But I do think I love your point though about safety and no different than for a child. I mean, safety is not just keeping someone from getting hurt. I think safety is a malleable state that can handle, it's more like a trampoline. It has give, and it's as opposed to just like, I'm going to surround you and you're never going to go outside. You're never going to get hurt. Very different. I think safety is the ability for someone to live and not be in constant fear or in a state of anxiety. I think that's so many people are trying to make their loved one happy. And you are right. It's really up to them.
Right.
But you can provide enough of an atmosphere for them to feel and experience joy. And some days it may be okay to not be happy.
Yeah.
Like
yeah. That's a whole, that's a whole other thing. But, and I do say, there was a period of time where I was like, Mom, you're in charge. She was living on her own, I'm like, I'm just your facilitator. Whatever you say goes. And for a long time that was okay. But then when her desire to be at home was more powerful than her desire to be safe.
Wow. Yeah.
Then it was like, okay, that's when we started to have conversations. And fortunately my mom is still able to, process and listen. And we don't always agree, but I, tell her another thing that really helped me too. And then I do want to get into like some ways that caregivers in recovery can set themselves up for success in maintaining their recovery. But I did just want to say that one of the things that really helped me, and it sounds like this is what the phrase you used was like, this is happening.
Right.
Get on board.
Yeah.
choose this, please. This is okay. Because I think that was one of the things, like, it's like, everyone's like, oh, I don't, like, I don't want to take, I feel like I'm taking everything away from them. And it's like, you're still allowing them to make the choices that are available to them. Yes. But they just are looking at some choices that are no longer available. So when you come to them and say, I would love for you to make a choice here. And in your case, it was like, do you want white paint or green paint,
Right, exactly.
Or whatever.
Yes.
But like you give them the choices that are actually available to them, and then they are still making the choices. And you say, listen, I want you to make your choices as long as you can, the choices that are available to you. And these are the choices that are available to you now.
Completely. And then they don't, I have found that, like, if I had left my dad with his firearm, like, that would have been irresponsible to not only to we would say to others, but to him.
Right.
That he and if I had told him that I left him with a firearm in that state, he would say, what's wrong with you? What are you doing? Like, and so I do think a lot of times we can rely also on things our parents have taught us. The things that they, a lot of times it's not as, I think it feels like we're taking something because we're so used to them being in control of everything. Right. And it's like, Chris, they were never in control of everything to begin with. Right. You thought they were because they were your parent. And it's like, they still had a boss. They still had a job. They still had traffic. They still had.
And now because you're a parent.
Right. Yes. Completely. Completely more than ever. And it was, so I do think that I think keeping them making choices, like I would ask him very honestly, like, do you want to keep fighting this? Do you want to do this? I support you 100%. Whatever you feel is right in this situation based upon what you can do. Do you want to pursue this? And I do think
having
those
conversations recently. Mm-hmm.
Yes. It's really giving them the opportunity to say, and that there's no wrong answer because it's their choice, like in that regard, Right. So, you're not taking, I think the thing is that it just feels like we are. And a lot of times really what we're doing is we're just trying to kind of create a new scenario. And it is, again, like, I don't mean to, I don't want to say beat the dead horse, because I'm like, who did that first? Like, who did that? And said, I'm going to use that. Who are these people? Like, first off, it just makes why? Anywho, this is my Wikipedia mind is not.
I was going to say our meme minds are just
our meme minds just like yeah. But yeah, that's the thing. It's just I think it's a beautiful concept to be able to give people the dignity to make choices, just like I do with my daughter, within where she is in this point in her life. And we'll say that, so is our parents just a baby? No, the same thing happens for us. I think for me, God does that with me. He has allowed me to make choices and make decisions, and he has surrounded me with things that sometimes it was out of my control. And there were things I could not choose. And I think we're just demonstrating that for our children, for our parents, for our loved ones. It's just an extension of that.
Yeah. If you're an overwhelmed caregiver that longs for some of your life back, craves time for self-care, freedom from the isolation of caregiving and the guilt, then the Empowered Self-Caregiver cohort is for you. Within the Empowered Self-Caregiver cohort, we'll take a deeper look into your unique caregiving challenges, assess your current self-care practices, and explore a personalized plan where you feel your self-care focus is most necessary. You'll design a self-care practice that is flexible enough for your life and something that you're going to actually enjoy. Erase your guilt, embrace a sense of worthiness and empowerment, and create an unshakable support system to avoid a lonely caregiving journey. In the Empowered Self-Caregiver cohort, I share the very steps I took to break the burnout cycle of self-care. As someone who has been a caregiver for over 2 decades, I know what it's like and I know what it takes to finally find balance. And my care framework inside the cohort teaches you to find that balance too. If you're interested in learning more about the Self-Caregiver cohort, please go to theselfcaregiver.com or check the show description for details. But thank you so much for joining me today. And for those of you listening or watching, thank you for joining me today. The From Guilt to Good podcast is a proud member of the Whole Care Podcast Network. To access additional self-care resources, and I will also link addictionhelp.com and the other websites mentioned by Chris today in the show notes. We want to help you feel good, not guilty. Check out the show notes or the description if you're watching the video, or head to theselfcaregiver.com. Subscribe now and join me in going from guilt to good as you rediscover your worth, reclaim your health, and get back the life you've been too busy or too exhausted to enjoy. And if you're enjoying the show, I would love for you to take a moment and give us a review. Your feedback really matters. I really would appreciate it. Thank you so much. And just remember, we're redefining self-care for caregivers one episode at a time. And until next time, remember, you are worthy of the same care you give others.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time.